Hello, I'm going to do a review of the article Teaching Culture in Colombia Bilingüe From Theory to Practice, written by Fandino and published in the Colombian Applied Linguistics Journal in 2013. In this article, Fandino addresses the incorporation of culture in EFL within the program of Colombia Bilingüe. His main claim is that teaching culture is essentially a deep analysis of people's own culture in the light of the other's beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors, in which language is just a gearing component. In Fandino's words, teachers and learners need to go beyond a superficial celebration of difference and insufficient inclusion of diversity so that they can critically examine how social and cultural practices are constructed, legitimated, and contested. After recalling some traditional definitions of culture from scholars such as Tyler, Hofstede, Hollis, and Byron, he discusses how to teach culture in general. From the ideas of Thanasolas, he presents the two well-known perspectives that have influenced the teaching of culture in EFL: the factual perspective, or the transmission of facts, and the interpretive perspective, or the analysis of both cultures by comparing and contrasting points of reference. What is important in this case is that awareness should be raised in regards to the self and the comprehension of others. Considering the ideas of Gramsci, Fandino points out that a fundamental aspect of understanding cultures is through interaction in discourse settings. In this sense, individuals engage in dynamic processes of making sense and assigning meaning of practices and culture, always mediated by their interests and agendas. Then, he moves on to discuss some elements of the teaching of culture in Colombian EFL programs. For this section, I want to highlight the reference to Alvarez and Bonilla's lingo-cultural experience, an approach that promotes the integration of otherness and mindedness. It entails a marriage between a critical intercultural approach and intercultural communication competence. That is to say, the recognition of and analysis of diversity and in the interaction of people to cooperatively make sense. In relation to culture in Colombia Bilingüe, Fandino acknowledges the fact that the inclusion of culture in the EFL class is not an easy task. Problems arise from one, assessment of intercultural competence, two, technologization of discourse teaching, three, textbooks for teachers, and five, inaccuracies in EFL programs. A clear reference, Fandino states, is the complaints of some scholars to the Colombia bilingual program, For example, the lack of conditions to implement a bilingual program in the country, classroom without resources, few appropriate materials, teachers with insufficient qualifications, just to mention a few. Another claim is that of Usman, who maintains that Colombia Bilingüe promotes inequalities, exclusions, and social stratifications as a consequence of demands for standardization and instrumentalization of the teaching and learning of English. Fandino claims that in order to incorporate culture in the context of Colombia Bilingüe, the academic community should consider three theoretical constructs of today's ELT discourses and practices. First, the post-method condition. Second, the world Englishes. And third, the critical multiculturalism. A post-method condition implies the empowerment of teachers to construct classroom principles and procedures based on their background and experimental knowledge. World English highlights the importance of going beyond the native versus non-native speakers of the language. This suggests that learners should pay attention to their capacity to perform effectively in the language and become effective international speakers, no matter the accent. Finally, critical multiculturalism means that members of the school communities have to place inequality and injustice as a priority and consider them within the relations of power and privilege of dominant groups. Finally, Fandino states five strategies to consider when working with culture in the EFL classroom. Um, 1. Fusing culture, language, and learning in the language classroom. 2. Connecting culture and communication in the language classroom. 3. Approaching strangeness and otherness in the language classroom. 4. Preserving cultural identity in the language classroom. And 5. Promoting critical consciousness in the language classroom. These strategies are expected to be universal in the sense that they can be easily understood and adapted to different contexts. Besides, they are expected to help to include culture in the EFL classes with a critical view of diversity and power. Lastly, they have to serve the purpose of avoiding those fluent fools who speak a foreign language properly but do not understand the social and philosophical content of the language. In general, let me tell you that this is a very good, well-written article. It's clear and focused. The way it is organized always shows the author's clarity in regards to the points that he is making. The topic is absolutely relevant, and the arguments presented are in line with the new approaches to the teaching of cultures in EFL programs. And the last part of the article is original in the sense that that he groups 5 strategies that make sense if a teacher or a community wants to articulate the language learning with the study of its cultures. One of my concerns about this article is that sometimes Fandino's voice is not heard. He gives more relevance to citing others than working on them to make his points. Thank you.